What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burtnett, bringing you a couple of Monday observations as we start to wrap up the spring football season, start to turn our eyes towards the transfer portal opening tomorrow, and kind of taking a look ahead to a little bit of time off, at least in terms of college football being in the headlines. We still have a couple of weeks of spring games. I'll probably maybe later this week really take a deep dive. I'm going to be going over some of my thoughts on watching some of Ohio State's spring game, and also talking about the transfer portal opening up again on Tuesday, April 16th. But before I do, if you go on to enjoy this video, please feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and turn on those post notifications so you're always up to date whenever I post. But without further ado, let's dive into it. And I'm going to start with kind of the main point in this video, talking about the transfer portal opening up. Now, there isn't really big news about this, but I kind of want to talk about my thoughts on the impact of the transfer portal, what it means that it's opening up, kind of taking a look back at last year as well. So first things first, last year when it opened up on April 16th, just about 100 players, I think it was something like 101 or 102 players, either entered the transfer portal, transferred to, from, or in between Division I schools, FBS specifically. And so when it opened up, you had, again, over 100 players, or just about 100 players, entering this portal. On April 16th, it kind of took a dip. Oddly enough, it was only like 13. I'm using the database that 24/7 Sports has. Only 13 entered on April 16th, but then it was back up to almost 70 on April 17th, and the numbers, continued to grow throughout then. So in the first just 3 days of the portal being open last year, you had about 180 players entering the transfer portal or transferring to another school if they had entered before. So what this offers is an opportunity for schools to potentially bring in players. You look at last year, you have very varying VARYING returns. You had the top team with transfers being Colorado. Obviously, they got a ton of hype. They were the top-rated team in the transfer rankings last year. And then you have Ole Miss coming in second. So kind of with those top two, you can see one team has a really good return, and some of those players even made an impact. Ole Miss had a very solid season last year. And then Colorado, those pieces don't always fit right away. USC and Auburn were third and fourth, two teams that were very much middle of the road last year, didn't really have major impacts. LSU and even more so Florida State were fifth and sixth, two teams that I would say LSU didn't quite reach the expectations that they had, but they still had a solid year, and some of those transfers, at the very least filled the roster spots, and some made an impact as well, and obviously Florida State had a huge season as well. Whether that was the transfers that made a huge difference, probably not as much, but you could still kind of see. I would be interested to see, though, the impact that this has if there was some sort of, just database again that has, players that transferred during this portal last year, and then kind of keeping track of them if they've stayed at the same school, seeing what kind of impact they have this year. But again, a lot of those transfers did probably have somewhat of an impact, and those are obviously major moves. And so another thing to consider too, and this is kind of one of the points that I saw kind of on social media with this thing, is the Tennessee rule, where you are allowed to, obviously, like, it's kind of like the Wild West a little bit right now. There aren't really any regulations or stipulations in these offers that schools can make to bring in players, and so you could certainly see, plenty of money being dished out right now for players while we're kind of in this limbo period, as the case is kind of in court right now, for having opportunities for college football players to jump schools. And I think of the guy, I think it's Caden Proctor, who in the last transfer portal transferred into Iowa and then re-entered his name into the portal after he had kind of pretty much picked up a bag in the portal, getting NIL money from Iowa. So there certainly is potential for that sort of thing to come up. And then, it's just an interesting thing to keep an eye on, which players that maybe haven't entered yet are going to enter. Another thing that Joel Klatt brought up on his show that I started watching for today on Monday was that there's, it's some teams are still right in the middle of spring ball. You look at Ohio State, Alabama, they just had their spring games, among other teams, LSU, Florida. A lot of teams in the SEC seem to have their spring games this past week, kind of as the wrapping up spring ball. But Some teams are still right in the middle of it. I know Michigan, for example, they will still have their spring game coming up on Saturday, among other teams, either Saturday or a week later for the most part. So teams that are kind of in this in-between period where guys might leave while they still haven't really solidified, that roster kind of adds a challenge. And why wouldn't this date be after spring ball ends rather than right in the middle of it for some teams? So teams like Ohio State or Alabama, where you have the spring game and you're probably making some decisions, or you're telling guys, okay, this is what we saw from you in the spring. This is where we're going to have you. Maybe you're third on the depth chart, and that's the type of player that would maybe transfer out if they're told that they're going to be kind of in that second tier. So those are all things to consider. Again, I'm very interested to see. I'm sure I'll have a video coming later this week on my typical kind of Thursday release date of what the early returns are from the transfer portal opening up. But that's it kind of for my thoughts on the transfer portal. Let me know your thoughts below in the comments, what you expect to see from the transfer portal and how important you think this period is. But kind of final thoughts here. And another big thing that happened this past weekend, the really odds-on favorite, maybe next to Georgia this year, to win the national championship, Ohio State had their spring game. It was a fun, entertaining game to watch. I didn't watch the entirety of it, but I was able to watch some of it. One of the things that stuck out to me was both Joel Klatt and Brady Quinn, who were on the call for Fox, were talking about kind of the Velcro coverage that the Ohio State secondary has. I think Caleb Downs made a couple of plays. The final play of the game was an interception returned for 6. I think Jalen McNeil also had an interception. So overall, a good game for the Buckeye secondary going against some of the best wide receivers certainly in the Big Ten, probably I would say in the country. Emeka Ibuka, I think Ryan Day revealed that he was playing with a high ankle sprain for most of last year, so that's something to keep an eye on. The Buckeyes kind of number 2 wide receiver behind Marvin Harrison Jr., I'd expect to be kind of in that number 1 role. Jeremiah Smith as well, the 5-star top-rated prospect coming in, is another strong receiver. And of course, the quarterback situation. I'll pop up some of the stats. I think overall got a pretty good look at all of the quarterbacks. And it'll be interesting to see, which one of those guys has the starting job, because Ryan Day was kind of mute on that, kind of not really revealing his cards with that. And then one final thought, I kind of pulled a quote that Chip Kelly said, really just brief from one of the things that he said when he was being interviewed, was, "I just want to coach." And I think that is to a broader issue maybe in college football. He kind of talked about this like CEO role that a head coach has, where a guy like Chip Kelly or guys that are coordinators kind of just want to coach the game. They don't want to have to worry about all these transfers and all just the organizational things that come with being a head coach. So I thought that was kind of interesting as well, those remarks by Chip Kelly. But yeah, those are kind of my thoughts. A little kind of midweek update. I know it's the beginning of the week, but I kind of go Thursday to Thursday with this college football talk. So let me know if your thoughts on both the spring transfer portal, your thoughts on spring ball, how your team is looking. I know obviously college football has such a wide variety of teams that are in different places. So let me know how your team is looking in spring ball and what you hope to see from the channel as we get into the kind of busy period for transfers, but a little bit of the slow period in terms of once we get through these spring games. But that's all for this video, College Football Talk. I'm your host, Peter Burnett, signing out. Peace.